Okay, it's just after 3 o'clock. I will call the meeting of the Planning Committee to order. And I'll begin by saying that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca. And so now I will virtually look to the committee to see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I will move to the consent items. I am pulling item 2.5 and item 2.6, but I wonder if committee members would like anything else pulled. Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, Madam Chair, if you could pull 2.4, and I would like to just make a comment on 2.2.
Any others? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to put all of the consent items on the floor except for 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6. Do I have a mover? Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, I assume? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. And Councillor Hopkins, you have a comment on 2.2. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the urban agricultural strategy that I guess we are going to be adopting here. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the steering committee. They've put in a lot of work during the past couple of years. This is a little different than our advisory groups. The steering committee is a committee that was set up a couple of years, and they've been meeting regularly, and really appreciate all the work that's gone into the strategy. And I am wanting to just through you, Madam Chair, given the concerns around food security, and I know that they are working on a guide. I don't know if it's staff or the steering committee, but more information I think should be, I'd like to see if there's more information coming forward with the guide. And also when it comes to what can we expect moving forward as well. I've heard food security is a conversation that comes up from time to time, and the need and the flexibility and the breakdown of barriers maybe that are existing. How will we see these addressed moving forward? So to through you, Madam Chair, to staff, if someone can address those questions.
Oh, thank you. Okay, will that be Mr. Barrett?
Yes, to you, Madam Chair. What's on before you today is the annual report from the Urban Ag Steering Committee, and to the councillors' comments and questions. The steering committee represents a group of folks who are involved in urban ag in the city. The how-to guide that the council referred to is something that's currently underway now. There's a draft that's been prepared, and essentially that whole how-to guide is how to undertake urban ag in the city, and it's going to help folks understand what rules are in place and what rules are not in place, the things you can do and the things you can't do. There's a lot, I think, of maybe some confusion and misunderstanding out there when you put urban agriculture in front of what it is that you want to do. Some people might think you can't do it, but things like what you grow in your backyard and those kinds of things, none of that is covered under any zoning regulations. So we're just going to clarify that for folks. But also simple things like garage sales and yard sales. Right now, under the zoning bylaw, 2 of those are permitted per year. And quite honestly, the city doesn't concern itself as to whether or not you're selling what comes out of your basement or what came out of your backyard. Right now, it's just that you're limited to 2 per year. And one of the things that's on our work plan is to do some further consultation and bring back probably a report to you that might actually allow more opportunities for this because of people growing more and more things like that at home. And with respect to what are we going to be doing, that's outlined in the report that's there. There's a lot of initiatives that are still being undertaken by the Urban Ag Steering Committee and the groups within the city. And the city's role primarily is to facilitate and to help bring about many of these actions. And a lot of times that our way of facilitating is getting out of the way. So that's where there may be regulations or policies in place that might not be supportive of this. And we would bring forward reports to you or changes that might help urban ag happen more easily. We've done some of that already. We've brought two zoning bylaw amendments forward. One was to allow the urban farm to be located where urban roots is and to make a change in the open space zoning to permit that use. And then we also brought forward a zoning change that allowed for farm gate sales inside the city. And this is a lot of language issues, but for example, farm gate sales were limited to selling produce from farms, and it didn't contemplate selling something like might come out of urban roots, which is not a farm in an agricultural area. So these are the kinds of things the city will do, and we'll bring forward more actions like that as we implement more and more things out of the strategy.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor? Go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Barrett, for that information. I have been contacted, a number of times, especially the past couple of weeks, about what we can and can't do when it comes to growing our food. And I look forward to the guide. Do you know, I know it's in draft format right now, but how will the guide be distributed?
Through the chair, that's one of the things we'll be working on with our partners through the steering committee. The city will do its bit to try to make it widely known and distributed, and then we'll also work with our partners on the steering committee. So there's a lot of on-the-ground folks who are represented by the members of the steering committee, so they should help us get a wide distribution on that once we get it prepared.
Thank you. So you're all good now, Councillor? Thanks. Anybody else? Any other comments about this or any other of the consent items that are on the floor? Seeing none, we have a mover and a seconder. I will go through roll call to and indicate whether you vote yes or no. Council or Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kayabaga.
Yay.
And so Councillor Turner will be joining us later. So I vote yes, and so that motion carries. Oh, I'll wait for the clerk to report that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Great. That takes us to item 2.4, the Meadow Lily Subdivision Agreement, Amendment Agreement, and Councillor Hopkins, you asked for that to be pulled. You're muted, Councillor. There you go.
I apologize. I wanted to pull 2.6. I had my numbers confused, and I have no concerns about sorry, I just want to make sure I do have it correct. So this is the application on the Meadow Lily subdivision, and I did have some questions around the slope stability, and I just want to make sure I have the right number. And I don't see it. I do apologize.
No problem, Councillor. Would you like to move the staff recommendation?
Yes.
And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Since you were my only other option, I can't see Councillor Kayamaga. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the vote on that. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kayamaga.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Great. So we'll move to item 2.5, and that is the request for council resolution under section 45 of the Planning Act, and it's 809 Dundas Street. Deputy Mayor Helmer, you pulled that one. No, you didn't. Staff asked for that to be pulled. Did you have a comment, Deputy Mayor?
I think it's appropriate to be fixing the mistake. I'm glad we caught it eventually. It's too bad that we have to go through the minor variance process to fix it, but it seems like the right way to handle it. So I support that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this item? So the clerk will read out the amendment because it's slightly different from what was originally posted.
The revised recommendation reads as follows: that the following actions be taken with respect to the property located at 809 Dundas Street. Part A. On the recommendation of the city clerk, the report dated April 27, 2020, and entitled Request for Council Resolution under Section 45 bracket 1.4 bracket of the Planning Act 1990 CP 13-809 Dundas Street be received for information, and Part B. The Managing Director, Development Services and Compliance and Chief Building Official be authorized to submit a minor variance application for the property located at 809 Dundas Street.
Thank you very much. I believe it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer and seconded by Councillor Hopkins. No other comments or questions, so I'll call the vote. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kayamaga.
Yay.
And I vote yes as well.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Item 2.6 is 130, 136, 146, and 164 Pond Mills Road, Pond Mills Subdivision Agreement Special Provisions. And I believe that is another amendment. Are there any comments or questions on this item from committee? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to read that amended recommendation as well.
So the recommendation is that the application to enter into a subdivision agreement between the Corporation of the City of London and Drulo Holdings, Inc. for the subdivision of land subdivision of land situated on the east of Pond Mills Road, south of the Thames River, and west of Shelbourne Place, municipally known as 130, 136, 146, and 164 Pond Mills Road, be referred back to the Civic Administration for further consultation with the applicant and to report back at a future meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move this. In my confusion with another item, this was the item that I did want to pull as well. Given the challenges of the slope stability and the failure, I think it's best that it be referred back to make sure that we understand the failures and what's going on.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Deputy Mayor Helmer. We need a second. Oh, sorry, I need a seconder first. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And now I'll call the vote. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay to the referral.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kayamaga.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Wonderful. So that covers the consent items. There are no scheduled items. There are no items for direction. So we have deferred matters, additional business. Item 5.1 is on the added agenda. It's the Hamilton Road Community Improvement Plan for forgivable loan programs. So I see Councillor Van Holst has joined us. I wonder if, Councillor, you have some comments or questions on this item?
Councillor Van Holst, your mic is muted.
Sorry, I had a little trouble finding the window. Yes, so thank you very much, committee, for entertaining this. You'll recall that during our budget session, this was a discussion how to move forward with that, and staff said that at the time the most straightforward path was to simply include it with the rest of the CIP programs. So I'm hoping you'll support this. We've had some success with the program already, and there are some others who are interested. So even though it makes a small difference, 12 or sometimes 6% in the program, it is helpful. And I think that in the present situation, it will be even more helpful. So we're looking much better on Hamilton Road, and we're going to be completing another project in that area. So I'm very encouraged about the support we've had from council, and I think you'll see some nice improvements. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? So I wonder if we could hear from staff on this. Mr. Barrett, would you like to provide some comment?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. The councillor is correct. This is a relatively small amount. The program is a program that's already identified in the CIP, so we would just merely need to, as the councillor's outlined in his motion, just put all those actions in place to get the program up and running. There are funds available to support it. And as the councillor said, these forgivable programs usually spark a little bit more interest.
So, Mr. Barrett, you had recommended a minor change to the motion that Councillor Van Holst was requesting. Could you comment on that?
Madam Chair, I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find that email.
I believe you had just taken a date out.
Oh, yeah. So there was some confusion as to whether or not this was to just go on as a program that ran with the programs that are already in place, and if so, there wouldn't be a date. But if the intent was that this be a temporary program to run for this year, then there would be a date in it. So it was just whether or not it would make reference to 2020, or if it would just be that we be directed to put the motions in place to get the program up and running. So
committee, there was an email that was sent with a possible motion that could be made at committee. Would the committee like the clerk to read that motion out? You can nod your heads. Sure. Okay, so the clerk will read out this possible motion.
That civic administration be directed to take the actions necessary to implement the facade improvement and upgrade to building code forgivable loan programs for the Hamilton Road Community Improvement Plan project area for 2020. It being noted that funding to support these programs are available in the CIP Loan Reserve Fund.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. So is it just the date that we're putting in? So is this just for this year, or is it already in the CIP? And there's opportunities for improvements, and there's money available throughout the CIP. So are we just saying for this year and then the program is ended? I'm just wanting clarification and just a better understanding. I know in the Lambeth CIP, for instance, we have the same program, and I just assumed that when it's available, people can take advantage of the program as long as there's money available. And I'm just trying to understand what we're doing here by changing, what direction are we taking here? Is it just for this year, or what changes are we making?
Through the chair, sorry, that could be my confusion. I wasn't aware. I didn't know whether or not this was just, if the councillor is bringing this forward just for this year, or as the Councillor Hopkins noted, that once these programs are in, they run with the regular program. So the for 2020 can be removed, and it would just be that we would bring forward the actions. I didn't know, which is why I had that in there, whether or not it was just for this year, or if the councillor's intent was that we just begin to implement the program.
I see Councillor Van Holst has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the committee. You may recall back in 2018, we instituted the program for 2 years. And the reason it was temporary was just to get us to the point of the multi-year budget. So that was just to fit that. And then the intent was just to go forward from there. So I didn't intend this to be just a 2020 project, because that would mean I would have to come back if we did it 1 year, just every year. So this was just supposed to move along with the other CIP projects. So I would remove the date and then ask that you vote on that motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you. And I think putting in a date makes it a little bit more complicated, but I would like to know, through you, Madam Chair, to staff, if by putting this motion in, obviously it was only a temporary plan. So now we're introducing the plan into the CIP and making it permanent. And if that's the case, does staff have concerns by doing that, and if there's money available to do that?
Mr. Barrett.
Through the chair, no, there's no concern with making it permanent. As I said, the confusion is my fault only. I didn't know whether or not this was, as the councillor said, it was on as a trial. The 2-year trial period is up, and so I didn't know if this was to extend the trial or to bring it as a permanent program. The funding is there, like all programs. The programs run as long as the funding is available, and as the councillor noted, this one's been running for a couple of years, and it was just to bring it forward to continue to run. So it doesn't need the date. And again, I apologize, I'm the one that added the confusion. Just drop the for 2020 and go forward.
Okay, any other questions or comments from committee? Oh, Deputy Mayor Helmer, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there. Go ahead.
Yes, Chair, I've had my little blue hand up for quite some time. So I just wanted to ask what the take-up has been like so far in 2018 and 2019 in terms of draws on the initial funding that was approved from the Community Investment Reserve Fund, and what our forecast is for take-up, going forward. It's described that the CIP Reserve Fund can cover the draw. I just want to make sure I understand what the amounts have been and what we expect them to be in the future.
Mr. Barrett.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't have those numbers at hand. My understanding is that there has been uptake on the program. The councillor actually probably knows better than I as to how much has actually been taken up, but there has been uptake on the program. these forgivable portions don't account for large amounts. The loans are funded back through the repayments on the loans, and then we make a grant back when the loans have been paid, and they are a portion of it. But I can't speak to the specifics as to either the uptake or what the actual number of applications has been.
So, Mr. Barrett, the deputy mayor also asked, like, sort of like a forecast going forward, which I guess adds to, similar to what Councillor Hopkins asked about having concern for long-term viability. And
Through the chair, no, we don't have concern on the long-term viability. All of the programs are funded. The funding goes, the payback on the loans goes into a reserve fund. And so that after council's initial contribution, there's money coming back into the funds to continue to make loans. That's monitored on an ongoing basis. And as I said, the grant portions on these programs are relatively small. And so in as much as they would affect the ongoing long-term monitoring, we look at that, but there isn't a concern with adding this forgivable portion into the overall programs.
Deputy Mayor, any follow-up?
Sure. Does anybody know the answer to my question?
I'm not hearing anything from staff. Do you want to hear, perhaps Councillor Van Holst might have some information. We can see what he has to say. Go ahead, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, except for perhaps the amount, the number of applications. So I think we've had 2 programs go through, 2 loans go through, and projects completed. And I believe we've got 3 others in the works. So it's not a large number. And of course, fixing up the businesses on Hamilton Road, most of them aren't very large, so the amounts invested aren't a great deal either. So the funds work out to small amounts. They're a bit of an incentive. I think what I like about the program is that sometimes people will consider making a change to their property, and they'll say, well, is there any money available for this? And to be able to say yes sometimes means the difference between a project happening and not happening. But I will point out that people have been fixing up their own properties by themselves as well, without recourse to the program. And so just by following the lead of others, we're seeing some additional fixes to the facades, and I expect we're going to see a few of those as well this year. There's a great one partly finished on right at Rectory in Hamilton Road. That particular project, they decided that doing a stucco in the top part was going to be the most cost effective for them and give them the best look. But that was one of the things that our project, as we defined it, said that wouldn't cover. So they decided to go ahead with that anyway. And you can see the styrofoam up there, and the company who's going to put it on is just waiting for the weather to get warm enough to do that. So hopefully we won't have more snow, but it's happened very recently. But once things warm up, that should go forward, and we'll see another building looking great on Hamilton Road too.
Thanks, Councillor. Anything else, Deputy Mayor? Your hand is still up.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks, Councillor Van Holst. And I know Mr. Barrett was describing the programs, and I think committee is pretty familiar with them. One of the reasons I'm trying to get a sense of it is because it's 25% forgivable on the facade improvement loans, which is they're maxed out at 50,000. So the grant portion is 12,500. The building code upgrade ones, which are much larger, those are 200,000, but they're capped at 12.5% forgivable. So that's 25,000. So the mix of, which programs are being accessed and how many there are, can make a difference in terms of what the actual outlay is going to be. Most of the money, as Mr. Baird has pointed out, is revolving and just comes back into the fund and it can be loaned out again, which is one of the reasons why the program is good. But the sort of ongoing cost is the grant portion. And that's why I want to get a sense of what was happening so far. I think I'm comfortable with what I've heard. One of the reasons I'm asking about it is not because I don't think it's a good program. I think it is a good program. We have it in Oldies Village and it works very well as part of the CIP there. But also, as colleagues know, we've had quite substantial financial hit from the overall pandemic. And I want to make sure that, when we said in early March that things were okay in terms of how to pay for things, that that's still true and that we have a sense of what the magnitude is. Some reserve funds are under more pressure than others. And I want to make sure that that's the case. I think I'll inquire between now and council about what we expect the actual magnitude to be. But at this point, based on what I've heard, I'm comfortable with it. And I will move the motion without the year so that this becomes part of an ongoing program.
Thank you,
Madam
Deputy
Chair,
Mayor.
sorry if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Through the joys of email, I actually believe I can answer the Deputy Mayor's questions. Over the last 2 years, there have been 5 loans that have been out and it's just under $50,000. So that's the magnitude of what's occurred on the strip so far. So as we go forward, if we were to be optimistic, we could anticipate the same. And as the Deputy Mayor has already noted, the forgivable portion is capped under all of the programs.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I see that Councillor Hopkins wants to second that. Any other comments or questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor Van Holst.
And final note, Madam Chair, through you, the percentages, as the Deputy Mayor said, are low. So that means we're leveraging this to get a big difference. Largely, it's the facades that they're looking after, and a small amount of lipstick will make a big difference on some of these buildings. So the cosmetic changes make a large difference, and I think the community will very much appreciate your assistance. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, I will call the vote. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Hey.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kaibaga.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
This has been speedy so far, and that covers all of our public items on the public agenda. So we have a number of items that are on the agenda that require us to go in camera. And with that, I am looking for a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Hopkins. Seconded by...
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Kaibaga. And I'll call the vote. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yay.
Councillor Turner.
Yay.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yay.
Councillor Kaibaga.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
So we'll just get things organized to go into confidential session. Of the public who might be tuned in, we're about to go into confidential session. When we will return to public session to adjourn, but we will not be starting the video back up. We don't have any other items to discuss in public, so when we come back into public, it will just be to adjourn the meeting. So there will be no video of the actual adjournment.